pull up that chair, won't you? Closer to the fire. That's it. The wind's howling something terrible tonight, and the rain's hammering at the windows like it's trying to get in. Nights like this, you're grateful for thick stone walls and a good blaze. Here, let me top up your glass. This ale's been in the cask since Michaelmas, and it'll warm you through. You'll have noticed the sign swinging outside, I expect. The Ostrich. Strange name for a pub, you might think. Stuck here on the Bath Road between London and the West. No ostriches in Berkshire, are there? But that sign's been creaking on its chains for near on 1,000 years, give or take. And the building beneath it has witnessed things that would make your blood run cold. In fact, the story I'm about to tell you is precisely why, on nights like this, when the wind moans through Colnbrook and the shadows grow long, sensible folk stay home with their doors barred. This inn, this very establishment, was once called the Hospice, a holy place founded by monks from Abingdon Abbey back when Henry I sat on the throne, meant to be a refuge for travellers on the road, a place of sanctuary. Ironic that, because what happened here turned sanctuary into slaughterhouse, and the landlord who ran it became one of the most prolific murderers England has ever known. His name was John Jarman, pleasant enough fellow by all accounts, skilled carpenter, knew his way around timber and iron, always had a smile for the weary traveller, always had the fire banked high and the ale flowing. His wife now, she was a different breed altogether, cold as January frost, that one. Sharp eyes that weighed you like a butcher weighing a side of pork. Together, they turned this coaching inn into a charnel house. 60 souls, they say. 60 wealthy travellers who checked into the blue room upstairs and never checked out. 60 men who went to sleep in a comfortable bed and woke, if you can call it waking, boiling, alive. Let me set the scene for you properly, because you need to understand what Colnbrook was in those days. This wasn't some backwater hamlet. This was the 17th milestone from London, right on the main artery to the West Country. The Bath Road was the lifeblood of commerce in medieval England, and the wool trade was king. Merchants from Reading, from Gloucester, from all the rich clothing towns of the West would come rolling through here with their saddlebags heavy with coin, headed for the markets of London. And coming the other way, London merchants bound for business in Bath or Bristol, purses full of silver. Picture it, autumn twilight, the leaves turning copper and gold, and the light dying early. You've been on the road since dawn, and your horse is spent. The mud's thick as porridge, and there's still 15 miles to London, or 15 miles back to Reading, depending which way you're headed. Then you see it, the warm glow of candles in the windows of the hospice, smoke rising from the chimney, the sound of voices and laughter drifting from the tap room. You'd be mad not to stop. Everyone stopped at Colnbrook, and that's exactly what John Jarman counted on. The year, well, the records say it happened during the reign of Henry I, which would place it somewhere between 1100 and 1135, though some scholars argue it was later, perhaps in the 1500s, when the tale was first set down in writing by a silk weaver named Deloney. The truth's been worn smooth by time, like a river stone, but the bones of the story remain solid as the oak beams above your head. Jarman had a system, you see. That's what made it so terrible. This wasn't passion or impulse. This was industry. Murder as a trade, practiced with the precision of a master craftsman. And at the heart of his system was a room. The Blue Room, they called it. Still there, actually, though it's not used for guests anymore. It's on the first floor, directly above what used to be the brew house. That geography is crucial. You'll see why. The fire's burning down. Let me add another log before I continue. There. Listen to it spit and crackle. That sound, that hiss of wet wood on flame. You'll want to remember that sound. Right then. Where was I? Ah yes, the blue room. The best room in the house, Jarman told his guests. Reserved for gentlemen of quality. A fine feather mattress, thick blankets, a view of the coaching yard, privacy. And it was all those things, except for one detail. The bed was a trap. Now, to understand what Jarman built, you need to picture the architecture. Medieval inns weren't like modern buildings, all square corners and level floors. They grew organically, room added to room over decades, staircases twisting at odd angles, floors that didn't quite match up. The Ostrich, or the hospice as it was then, was a maze of crooked corridors and uneven thresholds. Easy to get lost if you didn't know your way. Easy to hide things. Jarman, being a carpenter, understood joinery. He understood weight distribution, hinges, counterbalances. And he understood that people sleep deeply after a long day's ride and a belly full of ale. The blue room had a large bed, solid oak, the kind that could bear a man's weight without so much as a creak. But beneath that bed, invisible to the eye, Jarman had cut a trapdoor into the floorboards. Not a small hatch, mind you. A large section of the floor, perhaps 5 feet by 6, with a bed positioned precisely atop it. The bed frame itself was fixed to the trapdoor, not just placed on it, but secured to it with iron brackets. When the trap opened, the bed went with it. The hinges were on the far side, nearest the wall, oiled regularly, silent. And in the brew house directly below, 2 iron pins held the trapdoor shut. Remove those pins, and gravity did the rest. Jarman would oil those hinges every few months, usually in the dead of night when the inn was quiet. Methodical, careful. He'd test the mechanism with sandbags, making certain the counterweight was perfect, that the bed would swing down smoothly and snap back into place without a sound, a craftsman's pride in his work, even if that work was an abomination. But the mechanism alone wasn't enough. Jarman needed to know which guests were worth the risk. Not every traveller carried significant wealth. He needed the fat ones, as he called them. The really prosperous merchants who rode with heavy purses and asked for private rooms, who paid in gold rather than silver. That's where the code came in. The tap room would be full of an evening, drovers, labourers, minor traders, all mixing together in the smoky warmth. Jarman would move among them, the genial host, refilling tankards, sharing gossip about the state of the roads. And then a wealthy merchant would arrive, well-dressed, good boots, a horse that cost more than a common man earned in a year. Jarman would show him upstairs personally, all obsequious concern. You'll want the blue room, sir. Quietest chamber in the house, fit for a gentleman such as yourself. Then, descending back to the tap room, he'd find his wife in the kitchen, lean in close, keep his voice casual. Wife, there is now a fat pig to be had if you want one. She'd look up from whatever she was stirring, her face showing nothing. I pray you put him in the hogsty till tomorrow. That was it. That was all it took. A domestic conversation that could have been about livestock, about provisions for Sunday dinner. No one listening would think twice. But it was a death sentence. The boiling vat was always ready. Part of the daily work of any inn of that era. Brewing ale required huge copper vessels where the wort was boiled with hops. Or perhaps it was the scalding vat used for preparing pork, heating water to remove the bristles from pig carcasses. The distinction hardly matters. What matters is that there was always a great cauldron of boiling liquid in that brew house, bubbling away beneath the blue room. Waiting. Let me tell you about Thomas Cole. He arrived on a Tuesday evening in late October. The rooks were wheeling overhead, black against a bruised sky, and an owl had taken up residence in the oak tree by the stables, both bad omens, if you credit such things. Cole was a clothier from Reading, one of the wealthiest in the West Country, famous in his trade, a man whose horse would be recognized in any market town between Bristol and London. He nearly didn't stay. Standing in the coaching yard, listening to that owl's hollow call, something in him resisted. He was tired, yes. The road was foul. But there was a heaviness in his chest, a premonition that made him consider riding on through the darkness to the next town. He actually told Jarman he might continue on. But Jarman was persuasive. "Sir, the road to London is treacherous after dark. Footpads and worse. And your horse is near spent. Look how he favours that foreleg. Come, I've a fine mutton stew, and the blue room is already made up. You'll thank me in the morning." Cole relented. He always relented. That was his nature, trusting, generous, unwilling to give offence. But the dread stayed with him. Over supper, he was quiet, withdrawn. When Jarman brought him a second cup of wine, Cole asked for writing materials instead. Pen, ink, paper. He wanted to make arrangements, he said. Provisions for arms, instructions for his business should anything happen to him. Mrs. Jarman brought the materials with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Nothing will happen to you here, sir. You're quite safe." He wrote by candlelight for an hour, his hand steady but his heart heavy. Then he climbed the narrow stairs to the blue room, carrying his candle, his boots echoing on the old boards. The room was as promised. Clean linen, a wash basin, a window overlooking the yard where he could see his horse in the stables below. The bed looked comfortable, inviting after the long day. He knelt and said his prayers, a good man, Thomas Cole, then blew out the candle and lay down. Below, in the brew house, Jarman waited. Not long, just enough time for sleep to take hold, for the body to go limp and the mind to wander into dreams. The vat bubbled steadily, the steam rising in thick clouds. The heat in that room must have been hellish. Then, with movements long since practiced, he withdrew the 2 iron pins. There was no scream. That's the horror of it. The bed tilted vertically in an instant, smooth and silent on those oiled hinges. Thomas Cole, still wrapped in sleep, plunged headfirst into the boiling liquid. The shock would have woken him, but by then his mouth and lungs were full of scalding water. Perhaps he thrashed for a moment, his hands grasping at nothing. Perhaps it was over in seconds. Above, the bed swung back into position. The trapdoor closed. The room looked exactly as it had before, except the bed was empty and the sheets were cool. Jarman waited for the body to stop moving, then used a long hooked pole to pull it to the side of the vat. Mrs. Jarman was already there with a knife, cutting away the clothing, searching the pockets and the lining of Cole's doublet. Gold coins, a jeweled pin, a ruby ring. They worked efficiently without speaking, like butchers dressing a carcass. The body would be dealt with later, weighted and dumped in the River Corn, or buried in the kitchen garden, or, in some tellings, dismembered and disposed of in pieces. The method varied. The outcome did not. By dawn, Thomas Cole's possessions were hidden. His horse remained in the stable, and if anyone asked, well, the gentleman had left early, settled his bill, and ridden on toward London. Happens all the time at a coaching inn. People come and go. Except this time, something went wrong. The horse. Of all the things that could have undone them, 60 murders, near 1,000 nights of deception, It was Thomas Cole's horse that brought the Jarmans to justice. Jarman had grown complacent, you see. When you've done something terrible once and gotten away with it, the second time is easier. By the 60th time, it's routine. He'd grown careless with the smaller details. The bolt on the stable door wasn't properly secured. Perhaps he was distracted, counting Cole's gold by candlelight. Perhaps he was simply tired. Even monsters get tired. Sometime before dawn, that horse, a fine bay gelding, worth £20 if it was worth a penny, kicked through the rotten wood at the back of its stall. The animal knew something was wrong. Animals always know. It broke free and bolted into the grey morning, thundering down the Bath Road toward Reading with its saddle still on and its reins trailing in the mud. Now, here's where fortune turned. A farmer found the horse grazing by the roadside 3 miles west of Colnbrook. A magnificent animal, clearly valuable, clearly lost. The farmer, being an honest man, led it to the market square in Reading to see if anyone could identify the owner. Thomas Cole's horse was famous. Within an hour, his servants had identified it. Within 2 hours, they'd traced its route back to Colnbrook. Within 3, a group of men, Cole's business partners, his apprentices, local magistrates, were riding hard for the Ostrich Inn, their faces grim. Jarman saw them coming. He was in the tap room, serving breakfast to a merchant from Windsor, when the thunder of hooves announced their arrival. A dozen men, dismounting in the yard, their hands on their sword hilts. The merchant from Windsor put down his spoon very carefully and decided he had urgent business elsewhere. "Where is Thomas Cole?" The man who spoke was Cole's senior partner, a clothier named Sutton. His voice carried through the open door like a blade. Jarman maintained his composure. "Left at dawn, sirs. Paid his reckoning and rode for London. Said he had business at the Guildhall. His horse says different. We found his horse on the Reading Road. Then the animal must have thrown him, sir. Or perhaps he sold it and... Thomas Cole would no more sell that horse than cut off his own hand. Where is he?" The search began there. They tore through the inn room by room, the tap room, the scullery, the private chambers. They found Cole's saddlebags in a locked chest in Jarman's quarters. They found his ring, that distinctive ruby ring, wrapped in a cloth beneath a floorboard. And when they reached the blue room, when they saw that innocuous bed in that innocuous chamber, someone, one of the magistrates, a man who'd investigated barn fires and disputed boundaries, noticed something odd about the floor. The gaps around the trapdoor were nearly invisible, filled with sawdust and wax. But they were there if you knew to look. He stamped on the floorboards. They sounded hollow. It took 4 men with crowbars to pry up the bed and expose the mechanism. The hinges, the iron brackets, the pins, still lying on the brewhouse floor below. And when they went downstairs, when they saw that vat with its residue of grease and ash, when they smelled the particular smell that human fat makes when it burns, there was no more denying. They found 12 bodies in the kitchen garden. 12. God alone knows where the rest were. The corn gave up 3 more when they dragged it, arms and legs mostly, things that fish and time had made unrecognizable. Mrs. Jarman tried to run, made it as far as the Colnbrook boundary before they caught her. Jarman himself went to ground in Windsor Forest, hiding in a charcoal burner's hut. But Windsor was royal forest, and the king's foresters knew every hollow and ditch. They had him within a day. The trial was swift. This was the 12th century, or the 16th, depending on which telling you credit, and justice was a simpler, harsher thing than it is now. No 12-year court proceedings, no appeals. Jarman and his wife were hanged side by side on the Colnbrook Green, in sight of the Ostrich Inn, while the whole town watched. Some say Jarman confessed to 60 murders. Some say he went to the rope silent and defiant. The records don't survive, if they ever existed. But the inn survived. They burned the Blue Room's bed, of course. Threw the mechanism into the Colne, hinges and all. Filled in the trapdoor and laid new floorboards. Scrubbed the brew house with lye and salt until the stones gleamed. Tried to make it clean again. The building never forgot, though. Buildings don't. Over the centuries, the staff and guests have reported things. Footsteps in the Blue Room when it's empty. The smell of scalding water where no water runs. Cold spots that make your breath fog even in summer. A woman in Victorian dress, seen on the stairs. Some say it's Mrs. Jarman, still walking her rounds. Others have seen a man in medieval clothing, wandering the corridors with his hands outstretched, as if feeling his way through darkness. Thomas Cole, perhaps, searching for the bed that murdered him. In 2002, a group of paranormal investigators spent a night in the Blue Room. They brought all their equipment, electromagnetic sensors, temperature gauges, recording devices. At 3 a.m, their instruments went haywire. Every gauge redlined simultaneously. And on their audio recording, clear as a bell, they captured a voice. One word. John. The inn's still there, of course. You could walk to it from here in 20 minutes. The Ostrich Inn, High Street, Colnbrook. Grade 2, listed building, protected by English heritage. They serve a decent pint, or so I'm told. The Blue Room is mostly used for storage now, though occasionally they let paranormal enthusiasts stay there, for a price. The ladies' toilet occupies the space where the brew house once stood. Women complain about it, the sudden drops in temperature, the feeling of being watched, the door that locks itself from the inside. Makes you think twice about where you spend a penny, doesn't it? The fire's nearly out now. Look at that, just embers and ash, glowing in the dark like eyes. The wind's dropped too. You'll have a clear walk home, which is more than Thomas Cole had. Before you go, though, let me top up your glass one more time. Here's to the travellers who never made it home, to Thomas Cole and the others whose names we'll never know, to the roads we walk and the beds we sleep in, and to the trust we place in strangers when darkness falls. And here's to staying curious about the places we pass through. Every old building has a story, and not all of them end well. But that's what makes them worth telling, isn't it? The darkness shows us what the light is worth. Now off with you. Mind how you go. And if you're ever passing through Colnbrook of an evening, if you see that sign swinging in the wind, the ostrich, that strange, unlikely bird, perhaps give it a wide berth. Or don't. Maybe stop in for a pint. Just don't ask for the Blue Room. Some beds, you see, were never meant for sleeping. You've been listening to British Pub Law. Mind how you go.